Dungeons & Dragons tables, there's normally not that many rule mechanics that are off limits. Players tend to add more mechanics than they take away. God knows I'm guilty of that. And it's why you see a lot of players trend towards playing rule-heavy games like Pathfinder 2nd Edition rather than backtracking towards rule-light systems. But even at D&D tables, there are some things that tend to get banned, or tend to get banned at higher rates than most mechanics. And one of those things sticks out a lot more than the others. It gets banned a lot more often than most stuff. Well, two really. The first is the Aokur Race, because they get flight at level 1. I mean, fly's a level 4 spell. It shouldn't really be surprising that at level 1 it's a little bit unbalanced to be able to fly. Flight makes it easy to scout ahead. It renders stuff like lava rivers and pit spike traps and walls all completely useless. But as much as Aokurs are disliked by DMs, they're relatively easy to adapt to. All you have to do is put crossbows at the top of the walls, include weather that's going to blow people off their flight paths, have traps that shoot at players instead of just sitting on the ground and relying on gravity. But something that's very difficult to create around and unbalances encounters across the board, and is therefore greatly liked by players and greatly hated by DMs, is the spell Silvery Barbs. If you're brand new to D&D, there's a decent chance you haven't even heard of this spell because it's not in the player's handbook. If you've played a little bit of D&D, there's a decent chance you've heard of it but haven't actually seen it used. And if you've been playing a lot of D&D, you probably knew what this was going to be when you clicked on the video. Silvery Barbs is a first level enchantment spell available to sorcerers, bards, and wizards from the Strixhaven sourcebook. And here's the text of the spell. Casting time is 1 reaction, which you take when a creature you can see within 60 feet of yourself succeeds on an attack roll, an ability check, or saving throw. It has a range of 60 feet. Its components are verbal only. Its duration is instantaneous. Here's the wording. You magically distract the triggering creature and turn its momentary uncertainty into encouragement for another creature. The triggering creature must re-roll the d20 and use the lower roll. You can then choose a different creature you can see within range. You can choose yourself. The chosen creature has advantage on the next attack roll, ability check, or saving throw it makes within 1 minute. A creature can be empowered by only 1 use of this spell at a time. On the surface, this just sounds like a good spell. Cause disadvantage, give advantage. It's kind of all it breaks down to, so what's the hate about it? Well, let's break the spell down into its noteworthy parts, and then we can examine where the imbalances are. Also, I want to be clear that the reason for the hate towards the spell is not because everybody hates strong spells. If that was the case, I mean, there would be no wish spells or wish scrolls allowed in campaigns. It's because it's not balanced when compared to other first level spells. So, firstly, the spell is a reaction, which is uncommon in spells. There's actually only 8 total spells across all official source books that are reactions. The other thing about the casting time is that you only have to cast it once you know that the enemy has succeeded. It's like Smite in that way. You don't have to blow a spell slot until you know what you're doing is going to work. Secondly, it's first level, which is straightforward, but let's keep it in mind for later. Range of 60 feet, very standard, no issues there. It only requiring verbal components means you can pull it off without your arcane focus, without a component pouch. You don't need your instrument as a bard. You can even do it if your hands are tied. As for the wording of the spell itself, very straightforward. You cause disadvantage, you get advantage like we said. The only check on that is that you can't stack those advantages so that someone has more than 1 in a row. So what unbalances this? Well, firstly, it's the choosing to use it only after you've seen the enemy's success. And if you're saying, whoa, that's how Smite works, are you saying Smite's super imbalanced? No, but the big difference is that Smite is kind of what Paladins do. It's the whole thing. That's why there's so many jokes about Smite slots instead of spell slots for Paladins. Also, they're only half casters. All of the classes that can cast this spell are full casters, so they have ample access to spell slots. And in order to scale your Smite, you have to upcast it, at least until 11th level. In order to deal more damage with Smite, you have to burn a higher level spell slot, which again are rare for a Paladin. Whereas advantage scales and causing disadvantage both scale naturally with leveling up. PCs are hitting more because they have higher modifiers and better proficiency bonuses. So getting advantage is that much more powerful, and equally their ACs are higher, so causing disadvantage for enemy attacks. That's more powerful, simply because regular level ups are occurring. Here's important advantage and disadvantage is statistically. Rolling flat, you get an average roll of 10.5. With advantage, that average roll increases to 13.8. With disadvantage, it drops to 7.2. You have a 55% chance of rolling 10 or higher flat. With advantage, that jumps to 80%. And with disadvantage, it drops to 30. Advantage is significant, disadvantage is significant, and Silvery Barbs is giving both. I grabbed those stats from onlinedungeonmaster.com. That's where the table is from. So I'll throw the link in the description if you want to know more about that stat breakdown. And because as you level up as a caster, you're only getting more access to it without any cost. You're getting more first level spell slots, and at no point is the cost of the spell going up. It means it scales really well. So at higher levels, you can throw this around a lot, and you don't have to worry about scaling it up at all. You don't have to worry about it failing ever, because at a minimum, you're always granting advantage. Which is really the crux of why this is hated so much. It's because it's so universally applicable. Any combat that you're in, this can apply to. And if you're running a campaign with 0 combat, you can probably find a dating sim that's going to work better for you than Dungeons & Dragons. Every enemy makes attack rolls. Almost every enemy is going to be forced to make a saving throw of some kind. Even Counterspell is a 3rd level spell, and it requires a roll to succeed unless you're burning higher level spell slots. It scales. If you look at Silvery Barbs compared to Counterspell, it becomes pretty obvious how the imbalances line up. Both are reaction spells, but one is only useful against specific types of enemies, spellcasters, has the chance to fail, does not grant advantage even if it does fail, and is a 3rd level spell. The other always grants advantage at a minimum, increases enemy failure rates by up to 30%, is applicable against every enemy that makes attacks, and is only a 1st level spell. It's imbalanced. So are there solutions other than just banning the spell outright? Because that's, you know, you're taking away customizability from your players, and that's never fun. You don't really want to do that. But are there other solutions? One is to increase the 2-hit modifier for all of your monsters, so that even when they have disadvantage, they still have an increased chance of hitting. You don't have to worry as much about your rolls. But that means when your players are not actively casting Silvery Barbs, they're at a significant disadvantage. They're going to get hit a lot more. Another solution is to have enemies that force a lot of saving throws, because that can't be caused disadvantage on. That's a pretty good solution, and it tracks pretty well with a lot of creatures in Dungeons & Dragons, which are, you know, dragons with dragon breath, for instance. That's a saving throw. You can throw a bunch of dragons with dragon breath in there. It's threatening to the players. They get an advantage from the Silvery Barbs, but, you know, the dragon isn't disadvantaged. There's some play. And finally, a good solution is to increase the number of combats that you're running so that you burn through those spell slots available for Silvery Barbs more. I think this is what was expected when Wizards of the Coast approved Silvery Barbs because, well, they recommend a lot of combats in Adventuring Day, like a lot more than most people run. So it makes sense that you're burning a lot of spells, and even if the spells are strong, well, when you finally hit that big boss battle, you're already running low. Is Silvery Barbs, you know, this advantage, disadvantage, more important than cranking out a bunch of damage with a fireball? Maybe not so much when you're low on spell slots, but you gotta take care of getting rid of those spell slots as a DM before this starts to become a bit more reasonable. So you can see that as a DM, instead of slightly adjusting environments so that a player isn't way advantaged over everyone else, like having flight early, this is kind of applicable across the board, and it kind of changes the face of how you play a campaign, because you're dealing with a lot more combat, or you're dealing with enemies that hit more, or you're dealing with a lot of saving throws. Those things end up changing the campaign playstyle as a whole a little bit. I'm being a bit dramatic here, but you see what I mean. And because it takes so much work and so much more additional thought to adapt to, a lot of DMs just ban it. And that's Silvery Barbs. Do you think that's fair? Do you think it's being overly dramatic to say that it's hated? Do you think it would be actually a lot easier to deal with? Are there ways that you could deal with it that I didn't mention or didn't think of? I'm sure there are. Let me know. And yeah, come back. Come back.